Hey guys, I've got Alex here. This is our Creator Talk series where we find out a little bit more about the creators out there and what kind of gear they're using and really what really motivates them in terms of creating video content and photography and that sort of thing. So, just first of all, Alex, tell us a little bit about your journey there and how you started and that sort of thing.
Sure, yeah. I started about 10 years ago now. So like 2010, around then. Started making, short films just because I saw other people on YouTube. Back then when YouTube was just starting, I saw people on YouTube creating their own short films. And one of the big channels that inspired me was Wong Fu Productions. I'm sure some people know about them on YouTube, and they were the ones who inspired me to start filmmaking and make my own stories. And I was just in the backyard creating stories and around the neighborhood, running around with my friends and stuff, filming whatever we could. And then, it got pretty serious, and I moved down to LA for school, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree in filmmaking, and then, just started working in the industry. So,
Wow, I've noticed. Would you recommend going to college and like learning filmmaking? Like, do you need to go to school for that?
absolutely not. I 100% don't think that you need to go to film school anymore because of the internet. You don't need to go to school to learn filmmaking, but a lot of people lack the discipline. And school is the place that gives you the discipline to continue improving your craft. I'm sure most of us are a little bit on the lazy side. And if there wasn't a teacher, if there wasn't an assignment for you to do, you wouldn't do anything. You know what I mean? Like, so I think school for a lot of people is still very important. But can you learn filmmaking without school? Absolutely, 100%.
Oh, cool. So,
Yeah.
do you run your own business and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we run a business, a video production company with my wife, and we film weddings and we film commercials, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, how do you like balance out like the business side of the aspect with like the creative side of the aspect?
hmm
Like, do they work together, or do you have to kind of just like change your mindset when you're dealing with business and creative stuff?
A lot of times it goes hand in hand, right? So, because like a lot of businesses, we're working with a marketing team, right? So they have a specific story to tell for their company, right? And it's our job to visualize that as a video production company and sort of help them tell that story in a very succinct way, in a very creative way. And that's also where we get to have our creativity shine. Is it's not just not every project that we take on is going to be like the same copy and paste kind of video project. A lot of times it's different videos have different needs, so you have to use your own use your creative skill set in order to fully serve that project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess what are the like biggest challenges at the moment with the industry? Like, what's like the best, like the most positive thing about the industry, and what's something that is kind of really tough at the moment with the industry?
Um, right, I would say like something that's tough for the industry. Maybe I can definitely see like for some people like just starting to break into the industry might be a challenge. But with the internet now, a lot more things are a lot more accessible. Things are definitely more open to the public now. But yeah, I think I would say like early on when I was still in school, I didn't really have like a plan or like idea of like how I was gonna break into the industry, right? Like whether that's wedding industry, the commercial, actually being on set, telling narrative films and stuff like that. Like they're all industries that are relatively like unknown for the most part. I know like working on set, making connections with people in the industry is super helpful. But like besides from that, like how do I go from A to B within the certain industry that you're in? A lot of times, like I found myself when I was still starting out, like kind of lost in a way, not really doing much, just picking up random gigs here and there on Craigslist. So I really didn't have like a path. But now, like now I have a clear mindset, clear goal in mind, and so that really helps. one thing that's great about the industry is how I don't know, like I feel like the industry like has like a bad rap of like being so competitive, but like a lot of people that I meet on shoots and stuff are super friendly. They actually just want to help you. They really want to collaborate more because that's where the creativity stems from, right? You know, you can't just be doing everything by yourself, even though most of us want to. You know, don't want to let go of the control. You know, a lot of times I find that people are super open and they're willing to help you out and super collaborative.
Yeah, so you mentioned about the community and that sort of thing. You're big on Instagram, but I've also noticed that you got a really good YouTube game going on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mind just explaining like how you started with YouTube, and do you have any tips with people starting out on YouTube? Like some things that you've learned on the way that you really wish that you knew when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still relatively like super small. I'm barely at 3K subscribers right now, so I mean, I'm still pretty new to it. One thing I would like to touch on is that, you know, being comfortable on camera, right? Like a lot of people I know probably aren't super comfortable, you know, talking to the camera and, you know, being super open about everything. But I think like being comfortable with being on camera, and sometimes it's a little bit awkward because it's just yourself, you know, talking to the camera, and you're like, "Hey guys, welcome to you." You know what I mean? Like, so it's a little bit awkward. I get that. And what really helped me was taking a public speaking class, and just like being forced to stand up in the middle of the classroom and talking to 30 people. You know what I mean? Like it's nerve-wracking sometimes. You know, you're giving a speech, you have to be like, oh, you know what I mean? Like there's like certain things that you have to, you know, enunciate and stuff like that. So you have to like give yourself a character almost. And that was fun. It was really nerve-wracking, but it was really fun. I think being comfortable with, you know, public speaking really helps with talking to the camera, and that's one thing that I struggled with early on. Was I was a little bit awkward on camera, you know, didn't really know what to say, didn't really know like, oh, if this was too much, you know, if this was not enough, you know what I mean? So but I think being open to the camera and then also being consistent on YouTube is also pretty cool. You know, talking about stuff that you know personally, like, you know, even if it's not the most advanced trick or, you know, whatever tip, you know, it's as long as you're putting out, you know, stuff out there, somebody beginning, you know, a beginner would pick it up, you know. So I think that's it's good, you know, good to talk about stuff that you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, like, how do you like stay creative, you know? Like it's so crazy at the moment, like there's so much content out there. How do you actually keep your mind creative and keep like putting good content out there and that sort of thing?
I like to think of it as like like a mini little music video almost, you know what I mean? Like almost like a mini music video where, like, you know, you have the B-roll section where you're like, you know, you're trying to get as creative as possible, but then also kind of like explaining, you know, how you did, you know, certain things and why you're showing that B-roll and stuff like that. So like there's like a story almost to it, and so that's how like I try to get myself to be creative about it. You know, think of it in terms of like, oh, you're creating not just a YouTube video, but like maybe you're creating like a narrative story, like, you know, something that you want to be proud of, you know, when you're done filming and editing everything. So that's sort of like how I stay creative with the whole YouTube thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I just wanted to touch on a bit of gear, because I've noticed on your Instagram, you know, you seem to be a bit of a Canon fanboy. You've got the cinema camera.
Yeah.
And you've got your Canon EOS R. Do you mind just sharing with the audience, like, what kind of gear you're currently using and why?
Yeah, so I actually started as a Panasonic user. So when the Panasonic GH2 first came out, that was a long time ago, right? So GH2 was like a revolutionary camera, and the funniest thing is, I wasn't even the one who bought it. My dad bought it for me. Because he understood the hype when I didn't even want to go into filmmaking. I was completely like not into filmmaking at the time, and my dad was like, but I was still like making a little bit of videos here and there. And my dad actually took the time to research, and then he bought me the camera, and I didn't even know about it. You know what I mean? So like, it was so funny. So my first camera was the Panasonic GH2, and it's a great camera for its time and stuff, and filmed tons and tons of videos on that camera, and then moved on to the Panasonic GH4, which actually I still have on the the GH4 on my shelf. Yeah, so first camera to, I don't know, is it the first camera to shoot 4K, like the DSLR level? I don't know, but it was like revolutionary at the time, so it was really cool. So then afterwards, after I moved down to LA and got into like the events side of the industry, I started to notice that my videos, like the autofocus wasn't up to par at all, and then manually focusing took too much effort because you're trying to focus and then also catch the action and stuff like that. So there's a lot going on. And so I was thinking like, well, what if we could eliminate like the autofocusing, the focusing issue for me, and also like I'm on a gimbal, right? So like you can't be like focusing and then and then using the gimbal and moving at the same. That's too much, that's way too much. So I needed a system that has like great autofocus, and Canon was at the time the only one that had amazing dual pixel autofocus. And I know Sony is like it has caught up tremendously, but at the time when I was looking into the market, Canon was the only one who offered the solution to my problem. So not necessarily a fanboy of Canon, their gear is what works for me. And a lot of people like get that mistaken, is that like a lot of creators, they stick with one brand because like, oh my god, they're like, they love their stuff, die-hard fans and stuff like that. But I think most of us just use what works for us, for our gigs, for our projects and stuff like that. Whatever works for us is the camera that is the best for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I was thinking like, what if you could have just one camera to shoot with and one lens, and you could only use that lens and camera for a lifetime, what would be that combination?
Lens would definitely be the 24-70. That's a no-brainer for me, at least. That's 24-70. You have the wide end, you have the somewhat telephoto end, and then it doesn't matter what brand. I don't really care. Just as long as I have those focal lengths, I'm good. And then camera-wise, that's hard. Oh man, that's hard. I don't know, because then I'm thinking Canon, but then I'm also thinking Red cameras.
Oh,
so you know what I mean? Like there's so many things. Like a lifetime is like a long time, you know what I mean? Because then I want to get into like the filmmaking side of things and shoot my own narrative projects. So I don't know, maybe like a Red camera. Maybe I'll say a Red camera.
Really?
But maybe maybe the Canon C500 Mark II sounds good too. I don't know, man. So many choices. I don't know. It's either a Canon cinema camera or a Red camera. But it has to be like a cinema camera, because I'm into the filmmaking side of things. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You mentioned about your future and wanting to get into narrative and that sort of thing. Do you mind telling us like what are your plans for the future and where do you want to be?
Yeah. So I've, after college and in college, I was proactively seeking work on set, like narrative sets, right? So like we'll be filming like PSAs, music videos, narrative short films. I even got my chance to be a second AC on a feature film, so that was really cool. And so, but like in my time, I learned a lot. But you just don't make any money, and that's one thing that is super important, is making money and having a roof over your head while you're in LA. Everything's super expensive. Gas is even more expensive than any place else. But you need money to survive out in LA. And working on set, while it was fun and it was very eye opening for me on a lot of things, it just wasn't paying enough. So that's when I had the idea of, why don't I go into business for myself and try to get the jobs myself. And wedding filmmaking was something I did in college, and I had a lot of fun. It's documentary filmmaking in its essence, But I never thought actually I would go into documentary filmmaking. I was like, okay, I'm diehard narrative. I need to tell stories. It has to be scripted and everything. If it doesn't even have a script to come with it, I don't even want to touch it. You know what I mean? So documentary filmmaking was just something that was not in my head at all. And then a couple years down the line after college, I was like, okay, maybe we should give wedding filmmaking another shot, and so, we, about 3 years ago, I think, 3 years ago, we started our own wedding filmmaking company, and then that transitioned also into like commercials and stuff like that. So now we do both, and so financially we're doing awesome. And so my plan right now is to, like, while right now I'm not in the not on set making narrative short films and all that kind of stuff, like I do eventually want to loop back into it once we are more like stable and stuff like that financially. I do want to loop back and maybe even produce and fund my own projects. You know what I mean? So that's a great way of learning. Yeah, it's a great way of learning, but it's costly. It's very costly to fund your own projects. But hopefully one day I would get the chance to do that. And also like working on other people's film crews and stuff like that. That'd be awesome too.
Yeah, 100%. That's so cool.
Yeah,
And if you could like wind back the clock and tell yourself any kind of tips when you first started, what would be the thing that you would tell yourself when you first started filmmaking?
I think being in the business of yourself and for yourself is super important, and knowing that you have to market yourself. As a filmmaker, creator, whatever, you have to know how to effectively market your skill set, right? Like there's so many people out there in LA who can just pick up a camera and say, oh, I'm a photographer, I'm a filmmaker, and say that I can be a grip for $100 a day on your set. And anybody can do that, but like you have to know how to like stand out and stand ahead of these other people who don't know how to market themselves. And you have to say to people who are looking for your skill set that, hey, I'm here and I know exactly how to cater towards your project and stuff like that. So that, I think marketing yourself is the biggest thing that I didn't do when I was, especially in college, I wish I could rewind the clock and just tell myself like, hey, market yourself and make yourself available, to people, put your work out, in front of people's eyes, because otherwise nobody's going to find you, dude. You know what I mean? Like nobody's going to accidentally stumble on your YouTube page or accidentally stumble onto your website and just be like, oh my God, this guy's so good, I'm going to hire this guy based off the first video that I see off. No, it doesn't happen like that. So you have to understand how to like put yourself out there.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I in terms of like people DMing me and that sort of thing, a lot of people ask me what kind of camera they should start out with and what they should buy and that sort of thing. Do you have like a recommendation for a beginner?
I just made a YouTube video about this.
Nice.
So like, yeah, but that's like a year old now, so it's probably outdated by now. So like any of the beginner cameras, I think, are, super good to start out with. Anything below like 500 and below, I think those are like, $500 and below, it's like amazing for beginners. And honestly, like whatever you can find find online and whatever you can afford is like, honestly, that's what I tell everybody, like whatever you can buy and afford, that's the camera that's the best one for a beginner. Even if it's just your phone, there's apps now that are, sometimes you have to pay like, a couple bucks, but it unlocks the full potential of your smartphone camera. And now you manually adjust the shutter, ISO, f-stop, all that kind of stuff. And learn how to edit with it on, in Lightroom Mobile, so there's a lot of stuff, a lot of ways that we could be, creating, taking pictures and just practicing our skill set. And I think like, people shouldn't, use, like money or like not money, but gear as an excuse to stop or to not create.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And on that topic, like the using like excuses not to create and that sort of thing, what's like the biggest barrier to people actually getting out there and creating, do you reckon?
I think it feels so awkward sometimes to be out there. I honestly, like, sometimes when I'm like out holding a camera, people just, look at you, they're like, oh, what's that? Oh, it's a huge fancy camera. You know what I mean? Like there's sometimes, people give you like awkward stares, they look at you, and sometimes you don't want to just, don't want to take the picture or like don't want to film anything because you're afraid that the other people might say something to you. And, while I've never had that happen before, of course it might happen. And I think people are nervous of that. And I think, being judged or being looked at funny or something like that, like, oh, you're so weird, I don't know, what I mean, like I think like people get a little bit self-conscious, so I don't know, like for me it helped because I was with a group of people and like I was filming a group of people and like they were okay with it because they're my friends. And so that really built up my confidence and to really go out there and have the camera out and stuff. But I think really like that feeling of being looked at weird or making it seem like awkward or something, having a big camera around especially with like a full frame lens and a full frame camera, that's huge. It's a huge setup. So yeah, that might be a little bit awkward, but I think and then also like people being afraid of others saying like, oh, your work's not good enough, this is or comparing themselves to like the pros and stuff like that. Of course, as a beginner you're not going to be as good as a pro, and so like a lot of people get in their heads a lot of times, and I think that's what really stops them from creating.
Yeah. And do you get inspiration of other creators and that sort of
Yes.
thing? Like, where do you find like new tips and tricks and skills in your filmmaking? Yeah.
I think a big thing definitely comes from, seeing and watching other people's work. Like I'm always trying to find inspiration, especially if it's like a new like style of filmmaking that I have never done before or I have very limited experience doing. So I'll give you an example. It's like the perfect example right now. We're doing a project for the marketing team for a resort that we're working with, and they want to do the Daniel Schiffer super cool transition whip, transitions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like everybody's seen that. They've seen those videos. You know what I mean? Yeah. So they want something trendy. They've seen that everywhere on Instagram, YouTube. They want that style, and so like, oh, well, I've never shot that style before. Not that I don't like it. It's just, I've never had the reason to do it, right? It's not like I want to, do this and, whip the camera and stuff like that. So, so it's a new style and I've never done it before. So I'm going to watch all of Daniel Schiffer's BTS on exactly how he shoots it, how he lights it, how he edits it, and how he does the sound design. And then after I watch all his stuff and really understand what the essence of what he does, then I'm going to put my own spin to it. Maybe I don't I don't do a transition every single shot. Maybe I incorporate some of my style of like the slower cinematic, like the slower style and stuff, and try to play around with mixing those two things together and see, if it works or not. And so, yeah, so I think we just shot the commercial yesterday, and so that went really well. That went really well. So it was really cool. It was really fun. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is people not looking at other people's work and not really taking it, like looking at it from a really analytical point of view, right? You have to analyze like all the edits and all the ways that he's shooting it or someone's shooting it. Like that's how you can learn. Once you break down all the steps, that's how you can learn and practice and then improve on what you do. And I think that's super important in looking for inspiration. You can't be just blindly looking at somebody's work and be like, oh, that was cool. Now I'm just gonna go, not gonna bother to analyze it. I'm just gonna go on set and hope for the best. That never works. So really like looking at people's work and trying to actively find and seek out inspiration is really key.
Yeah, it's really cool how everyone's putting out new content and that sort of thing, and that whole Daniel Schiffer movement and the whole BTS movement is kind of like an on-trend thing. But it really like pushes creators more to, do more different styles and that sort of thing. Like you said, yeah. In terms of like the future of filmmaking and photography and that sort of thing, and the kinds of cameras that are going to be coming out and that sort of thing. What do you envision the future in terms of camera technology? Do you think cameras are still going to be relevant, or what do you see in the future?
Yeah, my grandpa is actually asking me all the time. He's always asking me, right? Always asking me, hey Alex, are robots gonna replace you as a cameraman? He's just so afraid that in 10 years, like robots are gonna just completely wipe out the cameraman job. I think I mean, we're laughing, but it could happen. But I don't really see it happening anytime soon, because like a lot of the stuff that we're doing takes a very creative approach to it, right? To the projects and the videos that we're creating. And so like I don't think that robots and AI are at a point where they can just simply replace every single video creator. And it might be, we're cheaper. We're probably cheaper than a robot anyways. We're probably most likely cheaper than paying a robot. But so I think in the future, filmmaking is definitely going to be more like set oriented, which kind of like there's like a drawback, and there's also pros and stuff like that. Like we've seen on the Mandalorian, the Disney Plus show about Star Wars. They've actually shot a lot, if not all, of their stuff on this like I don't remember what it was. It was like an LED or OLED panels, like a huge backdrop, like huge sick wall, but they're just lined up with panels, and you can just play images and videos on in the background, and like it will coordinate with the camera. As the camera moved, the background also moved. It was like, it's mind-blowing seeing the kind of like technology and the styles there are different ways of filming and stuff like that now. So I think that might be more, I don't know, maybe more relevant in the future as we progress like 10, 20, 30 years down the line. I think a lot more electronic parts like film. I don't know. I like, as much as I like film, it's cool, but like there's just so much that we can do in digital. So I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, do you see yourself like keeping up with that future?
I hope so. That'd be cool because I've never had the chance to really touch the bleeding edge and be in contact with those kind of technology yet. Hopefully by the time I do find myself back into the film industry, that those technologies are more accessible, because right now they're super expensive and stuff like that. You need like a huge budget to operate those kind of things. And so hopefully by the time we enter the industry, that it's more accessible to more filmmakers, so we can get really creative with how we shoot stuff. We don't necessarily have to go to a different place and a different country or a different city to film the locations. We can just shoot it in a studio and do it that way. Of course, there's drawbacks of not actually being in the location, so there's that. But I think that we can sort of manipulate it in post.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I guess to finish off the interview,
Mm-hmm.
I also get a lot of questions about how to maintain your Instagram and tips for Instagram and that sort of thing. What's your number one tip for Instagram to get an Instagram account going and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think big thing is to be authentic, and also being consistent. Posting every day. It has really helped me, especially early on in the beginning. Like I was posting for like a year straight. The first year of like actually trying to grow my Instagram account, I posted every single day. So 365 posts, one post a day.
Wow.
And so that was tough, because you have to find a caption, a meaningful caption at that. Try to give people value and help them, and try to take them through my journey of like how I became a filmmaker, or how just like simple stuff like being on set, like how I rigged up this camera, yada yada yada, and stuff like that. So try to give value to people and be authentic, because people can smell you out if you're fake, you're trying to fake it on Instagram. So it's really apparent. Yeah, I think being authentic, bring value, and then being consistent. Those are like my top three tips.
Okay.